Okay, so picture this. It's July 1945. The Second World War is in its final chaotic moments, and you're on a submarine, the USS Barb, deep in enemy waters off the coast of Japan. Now your commander, a guy named Eugene Flucky, is staring through the periscope, but he's not looking for ships, no. He's watching a trail of smoke curling over the mountains, listening to the faint, rhythmic sound of a train. And right then and there, he gets an idea. An idea so completely out there, so absurd, that no one in the history of naval warfare had ever even thought of it. He decides his submarine is about to declare war on a train.
I mean, seriously, can a submarine sink a train? That's the question that kicks off one of the most unbelievable missions of the entire war. Look, submarines sink ships, right? That's what they do. They're all about stealth, striking from beneath the waves. They are not designed for landing parties in rubber rafts to go blow things up on land. But this story, it isn't about what a submarine is supposed to do. It's about what one could do if you had the right leader and a crew that believed in him.
So to really get this, we have to go to the coast of Karafuto, which was a Japanese home island. And that train, it was an absolute lifeline. It was shuttling troops and supplies up the coast, getting ready for the Allied invasion that everyone knew was just over the horizon. Now, to any other submarine commander, that train is just scenery. It's not a target. But to Commander Flucky, it was everything. It was a target that didn't exist in any naval manual because the whole idea was just, well, impossible. Think about the sheer guts behind that single thought. A submarine was about to declare war on a train. That one sentence just completely tossed all of naval doctrine out the window. It wasn't just unconventional. It was a total reimagining of what a submarine even was. It was no longer just a weapon of the sea. It was about to become a tool for sabotage on land. This was the exact moment the impossible started to feel possible. So how do you get to a point where you can even try something so ridiculously outside the box? Well, it doesn't start with the machine. It starts with the man. To pull off the impossible, you need a leader who thinks differently. And, just as importantly, you need a crew that has been forged in the fire of his genius. A crew that trusts him, absolutely. So let's meet the man himself, Commander Eugene "Lucky" Flucky. And I love this description of him. He was a man who treated naval doctrine as suggestions rather than limitations. I mean, come on. At just 30 years old, he takes over the Barb, and he brings this mindset that's way more dangerous than any torpedo. His crew called him Lucky, and it wasn't just because he got them out of impossible jams. It was because when you served with him, you just knew you were going to be part of something spectacular, and you were going to come home. You know, before Flucky took over, the Barb had a pretty meh record. It was an average sub. But after he took command, it became an absolute legend. We're talking about a guy who, on his very first patrol, hid his sub among chunks of pack ice to escape enemy destroyers, a place no one had ever dared to go. He was sinking multiple ships in single battles. But the real showstopper was sinking the massive escort carrier Yonyo. That was one of only 4 Japanese carriers sunk by American subs in the entire war. Flucky wasn't just doing well. He was literally rewriting the playbook for submarine warfare. But the real test that turned this crew into a unit that could attack a train, was the raid on Nam Quan Harbor. Historians literally call it a suicide mission. Flucky found 30 Japanese ships hiding in this harbor that was basically a death trap. We're talking mines, super shallow water, patrol boats everywhere. Every rule in the book screamed, stay away. Flucky looked at the charts and said, nope, we're going in. In the dead of night, with the sub's belly practically scraping the seafloor, he snuck the Barb in, fired off his torpedoes, and created pure, unadulterated chaos.
And this is why his crew trusted him with their lives. To get out of that harbor, with enemy guns firing at them, Flucky ordered the engines to 150% overload. The Barb rocketed out of there at 23.5 knots. Now that might not sound like a lot, but for a submarine at the time, that was a world speed record that stood for years. They crash dived just seconds before a Japanese plane appeared overhead. After that raid, the crew knew. If Flucky gave an order, no matter how insane it sounded, he had a plan to get them home safe. And for that mission, he was awarded the Medal of Honor.
Okay, so now you get it, right? You've got a commander who sees rule books as light reading and a crew that would follow him to hell and back. So now we can go back to that impossible idea. We can go back to the train. I mean, Flucky had already pushed the limits by installing rocket launchers on the Barb's deck, making it the first sub to shell targets on shore. But this was a whole other level. So the first major hurdle wasn't even getting the guys to shore. The real problem was, how do you blow up the train without leaving a man behind to die?
I mean, the first idea was to just have someone hide and hit a plunger, but that was a guaranteed death sentence. No, they needed an engineering solution. They needed a way for the train to essentially blow itself up. And the answer? It didn't come from some military textbook. It came from a childhood memory.
So Flucky breaks the mission down, piece by piece, like a classic heist film. First, the team. He only wanted unmarried volunteers. He didn't want to make any widows. And get this, he prioritized guys with Boy Scout experience because they knew how to navigate on land. The entire crew volunteered, but he picked an 8-man team. Then, the tools. Submarines don't exactly carry shovels, so his engineers literally cut up steel plates from the engine room floor and welded them into makeshift shovels. And finally, the weather. They needed a cloudy night, and they waited 4 long days for the perfect conditions.
And here is where the absolute genius comes in. It's from a guy named Billy Hetfield, an electrician's mate. He remembered being a kid and put in walnuts on the railroad tracks to watch the train crush them. And he knew that even a heavy steel rail sags just a tiny bit under the massive weight of a locomotive. So his idea was brilliant. He built a small microswitch, put it under the rail, and calibrated it so that the tiny dip from the train's weight would close the circuit and boom, the train would become the trigger for its own destruction. So the USS Barb basically became a floating weapons lab. The crew just built everything they needed from whatever they could find. You've got the homemade shovels, a 55-pound demolition charge wired up to batteries, and of course, Hatfield's custom-built microswitch. It just goes to show the kind of incredible ingenuity Flucky encouraged on his ship. These guys weren't just sailors, they were inventors, solving an impossible problem right there in the middle of enemy territory. Just after midnight on July 23rd, the team slips into 2 rubber rafts and starts paddling almost 1,000 yards to the shore. The tension must have been off the charts. They land, move inland, and start digging. And then, the absolute worst thing happens. They hear the whistle of an approaching train. They haven't even set the charge yet. The men just freeze, then dive into the bushes, literally feet from the tracks as a train packed with Japanese soldiers thunders past. They were so close. One wrong move, and it's all over. The train passes, and they scramble to finish the job, plant the charge, and get back to the rafts.
And now for the payoff. The moment that made all that risk, all that ingenuity, completely worth it. The moment that would give the USS Barb a legacy unlike any other submarine in history. The commandos are paddling back to the sub. Their part is done, but they still have no idea if it actually worked. Well, they didn't have to wait very long. At 1:47 in the morning, just 15 minutes after the team had left the beach, another train whistle cuts through the night. The locomotive hits the spot, and here's how Commander Flucky himself described it. Wreckage flying up some 200 feet, cars piling up into and over the wall of wreckage, a writhing, twisting maelstrom. The explosion was so huge it lit up the entire coastline. Flucky immediately got on the intercom and told everyone who wasn't on duty to come topside and watch the fireworks. But you see, the impact of this mission was so much bigger than just one destroyed train. This was the only ground combat operation by American forces on the Japanese home islands during the entire war. Let that sink in. Bombers were hitting cities from the sky, but this was the only time American boots were on sovereign Japanese soil conducting a mission like this. The psychological damage was immense. I mean, if a sub could land a team to blow up a train, what else could they do? It completely changed the game. And you can see the proof of this incredible feat stitched right onto their battle flag. When the Barb came home, that flag told its story. It had silhouettes for the 17 ships it sank. It had ribbons for the Medal of Honor. And right there, alongside all the traditional symbols of naval victory, was the silhouette of a Japanese locomotive. To this day, it is the only submarine battle flag in any navy, anywhere on Earth, to feature a train. And here, maybe, is the most amazing fact of the whole story. Through all 5 patrols under Eugene Flucky's command, through the suicide mission at Namquan Harbor, through dodging hundreds of depth charges, and through the train raid itself, the USS Barb suffered 0 combat casualties. Not one man even got a Purple Heart. That wasn't just luck. That was incredible skill, planning, and a commander whose wild risks were always backed up by a solid plan to bring every single one of his men home. You know, the story of the USS Barb and the train it sank is so much more than just a cool war story. It's a powerful lesson that the limits we think we have, well, they often exist more in our heads than in reality. It proves that sometimes the rulebook is just a starting point, and real breakthroughs come from the people who are brave enough to ask, why not? And it leaves us with a pretty big question, one that's just as important today as it was back then.
What are the impossible problems we're facing right now that we could actually solve if we just had the courage to think and to act like the crew of the USS Barb?